Number 1. Alberto Nisman. The halls of power are often built on secrets so dark, they can never see the light of day. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, one man held the key to unlocking a conspiracy that reached the absolute highest office in the land. His name was Alberto Nisman, and he was a federal prosecutor who did not know how to back down. For years, he obsessively traced the threads of a 1994 terrorist bombing, a tragedy that left 85 dead and shattered the nation's soul. His relentless pursuit of the truth was about to make him the most dangerous man in South America. He had gathered explosive evidence, compiling a massive criminal complaint. This was not just a file of vague theories. It was a direct accusation against the sitting president, claiming she orchestrated a massive cover-up to shield the operatives responsible for the massacre. The tension in the capital was suffocating. Nisman was scheduled to present his damning evidence to Congress in mere hours. The entire country held its breath, waiting for the political earthquake. But the elite rarely allowed themselves to be cornered without a fight. If you were holding evidence that could take down a head of state, would you still testify, or would you run for your life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to uncover more dark secrets of the powerful, make sure to subscribe and drop a like on this video. Because the heavy silence of his locked apartment was about to conceal a terrifying truth. January 2015. The weekend before his testimony, Nisman isolated himself in his luxury apartment. Security was incredibly tight, as he had received numerous death threats. 10 federal police officers were assigned to his protective detail, stationed right outside. It was supposed to be an impenetrable fortress. Yet, as Sunday progressed, an eerie silence settled over his residence. His mother, frantic after her son stopped answering his phone, rushed to the building. What she found would forever scar the history of Argentina. The door was locked from the inside. When a locksmith finally forced it open late into the night, they discovered a scene straight out of a nightmare. Nisman was found lifeless on the cold tiles of his bathroom floor, surrounded by a heavy pool of blood. Beside him lay a small caliber pistol, an unassuming weapon that had just changed the course of a nation. A single bullet had been fired into his head. The immediate assumption, pushed rapidly by the arriving authorities, was that the immense pressure had broken him. They wanted the public to believe the prosecutor had taken his own life hours before his greatest triumph. But the evidence whispered a much darker story. How would you react if you walked into a high-security room and found a scene like this? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if you are gripped by this mystery. Because as the forensic teams began their meticulous work, they uncovered a chilling detail that proved the prosecutor did not pull that trigger. The official narrative of suicide began to unravel almost immediately. When investigators tested Nisman's hands for gunshot residue, the results sent shockwaves through the entire department. The tests came back completely negative. There was zero trace of residue on the hands of the man who supposedly fired the fatal shot. Furthermore, a closer inspection of the bathroom revealed subtle but undeniable signs of a violent physical struggle. The crime scene had been carefully manipulated. Microscopic traces of a third party were discovered in the apartment, phantom footprints of someone who had slipped past the heavy security detail, executed the prosecutor, and vanished into the night like a ghost. The massive criminal complaint he had meticulously drafted against the sitting president was left orphaned on his desk. The timing was simply too perfect for the political elite. Someone incredibly powerful needed Nisman's silence before he could step up to the microphone in Congress and read his findings into the permanent public record. The government frantically tried to maintain the illusion of a self-inflicted wound, but the citizens took to the streets in the pouring rain, demanding justice for the man who was murdered for knowing too much. Paranoia gripped the nation. Do you think you could successfully hide the truth from an entire country if you had ultimate power? Let me know your honest answer in the comments below. Make sure to hit that like button if this cover-up makes your blood run cold. Because the final verdict on his death would take years, and the shadow of the true mastermind was preparing to evade justice entirely. It took 2 long years of bitter legal battles, independent autopsies, and public outcry before the truth was officially recognized. In 2017, an Argentine federal court delivered a landmark ruling that confirmed what the public had suspected all along. Alberto Nisman's death was officially classified as a homicide. He was murdered in cold blood. Despite the mountain of suspicion and the staggering motive, the president vehemently denied any involvement in the assassination or the cover-up of the terrorist bombing. She maintained her innocence, calling the accusations a politically motivated witch hunt designed to destroy her legacy. To this day, the intellectual author of the crime, the invisible hand that guided the assassin into that locked bathroom, remains completely unknown and unpunished. The hitman slipped through the cracks of a broken system, leaving behind a grieving family and a nation starved for truth. Nisman died clutching the secrets of the powerful, becoming a grim reminder of the ultimate price paid for demanding accountability from elites who operate above the law. His empty chair in Congress still haunts the public conscience. The terrifying reality is that the people who ordered his execution are still out there, walking freely among the politicians they protect. They silenced the voice, but they could not erase the echo of his defiance. Far away from South America, another scandal was quietly brewing in the United States. Only this time, a young woman walking through a darkened park would vanish into thin air, leaving behind a trail of secrets leading straight to Capitol Hill. Number 2. Chandra Levy. That young woman was 24-year-old Chandra Levy, an ambitious federal intern whose sudden disappearance would tear the mask off Washington's political elite. In the spring of 2001, the nation's capital was buzzing with power and promise. Chandra had just finished her internship and was preparing to return home to California. She stepped out of her apartment one afternoon, heading toward the sprawling, heavily wooded trails of Rock Creek Park. She never returned. Her luggage sat untouched in her room, her wallet and keys left behind as if she intended to be gone for only a few minutes. As her frantic parents pleaded for answers on national television, police began to peel back the layers of Chandra's private life. What they found was a carefully hidden, highly secretive romantic relationship. The man at the center of this secret was Gary Condit, a married, incredibly powerful United States congressman. The revelation sent shockwaves through the media, transforming a missing persons case into a massive political scandal. The power dynamic was completely skewed, pitting a young student against a political titan with the resources to make problems disappear. He initially denied the affair, only adding fuel to the growing suspicion that he knew exactly what happened to her. How easy do you think it is for someone with immense power to hide a secret life from the entire world? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you are fascinated by the dark side of politics, please drop a like on this video. Because the deeper investigators dug into the congressman's timeline, the more terrifying her final days became. For months, the entire country was captivated by the intense media circus surrounding Congressman Condit. The pressure was suffocating. After repeated denials, he was finally forced to admit to the extramarital affair, but he fiercely maintained his innocence regarding her vanishing. He claimed he had no idea where she was. Despite the intense public suspicion, police struggled to find any physical evidence linking the politician to a crime. The early days of the investigation were heavily criticized for severe bungling and missed opportunities by law enforcement. As the seasons changed, the frantic search slowly faded from the front pages. Then, a full year later, the agonizing wait came to a horrific end. A man walking his dog through a steep, remote, heavily overgrown incline in Rock Creek Park spotted something white in the brush. It was a human skull. Investigators rushed to the scene, uncovering a grim tableau of scattered skeletal remains. Nearby, they found her torn clothing, including a sports bra and a pair of running tights that had been tightly knotted, indicating she had been brutally bound or strangled. The terrifying reality of her final moments in that isolated ravine was finally undeniable. She had been hunted in the shadows. If you were leading this investigation, would you focus solely on the powerful politician, or look for a random attacker hiding in the woods? Share your investigative theory in the comments. Be sure to leave a like if you want to see justice served in this case. Because the police were about to make a shocking pivot that would change the entire narrative of the murder. With the discovery of her body, the immense pressure to close the case reached a boiling point. But instead of tightening the net around the congressman, detectives abruptly shifted their focus entirely. They zeroed in on a transient man named Ingmar Guandik. He was already serving time in prison for violently assaulting 2 other female joggers in Rock Creek Park around the exact same time Chandra went missing. The pattern was incredibly similar, making him a prime suspect. But there was no DNA, no murder weapon, and no physical evidence tying him directly to her remains. The prosecution built their entire case on the shaky foundation of jailhouse informants. Inmates testified that Guandik had confessed to the murder behind bars, bragging about the high-profile killing. It was a massive gamble, relying on the word of convicted criminals to solve the biggest case of the decade. But the jury believed it. Guandik was found guilty and sentenced to 60 years. Congressman Condit was legally cleared, though his political career was utterly destroyed by the scandal. For a moment, Washington breathed a sigh of relief, believing the monster had been locked away. Do you trust jailhouse informants when a high-profile conviction is on the line, or will people say anything for a reduced sentence? Let me know your thoughts down below. Please drop a like on this video if this sudden twist caught you off guard. Because the courtroom victory was nothing but an illusion, and the real nightmare was just about to unfold. Years passed, and the tragic story of the young intern seemed permanently settled in the history books. But the foundation of the conviction was rotting from the inside. In 2016, a bombshell revelation completely shattered the case. Secret recordings emerged, proving that the prosecution's star witness, the jailhouse informant, had a long history of lying and had completely fabricated the confession. The entire trial was a house of cards. Facing a massive scandal, the government was forced to completely overturn Guandik's conviction. The charges were dropped, and he was quietly deported, walking away a free man. The devastating reality washed over the public. The police had wasted over a decade chasing a phantom, while the real predator slipped through their fingers. The authorities were right back to square one, with ruined evidence and cold leads. Congressman Condit was never charged with any crime, leaving a permanent cloud of suspicion hovering over the capital. Today, the true killer of Chandra Levy remains a total mystery, an unidentified phantom who hunted in the shadows of the nation's most powerful city and simply got away with it. The dark woods of Rock Creek Park still hold the terrible secret of her final moments, perfectly preserved in silence. But while this tragedy was hidden deep within a quiet forest, our next chilling mystery erupted in broad daylight on a beautiful island, where a massive explosion would silence a journalist who knew entirely too much. Number 3. Daphne Caruana Galizia. That explosive silencing echoed across the sun-drenched hills of Malta, tearing through the quiet village of Bidnija. The Mediterranean island is known for its stunning coastlines, but beneath the surface, a dark web of absolute corruption was quietly suffocating the nation. Standing against this tide was Daphne Caruana Galizia, a fiercely independent investigative journalist who acted as a one-woman intelligence agency. She made a career out of exposing the darkest secrets of the political elite, publishing financial documents that tied government ministers to massive offshore operations. Her words were sharp, and her evidence was undeniable. She was effectively dismantling the power structure of the country piece by piece from her laptop. Because of her work, she lived under a constant, suffocating cloud of intimidation, receiving daily death threats designed to break her spirit. But she refused to stop, continuing to dig deeper into a criminal syndicate that operated seamlessly within the halls of Parliament. On the afternoon of October 16, 2017, she walked out to her vehicle parked just down the road from her house. She turned the key in the ignition, completely unaware that she had been watched every single second of the day. If you knew that doing the right thing would put a massive target on your back, would you still publish the truth? Let me know down in the comments. Please drop a like on this video if the bravery of this journalist inspires you. Because the moment the engine roared to life, the picturesque island was shattered by an act of unprecedented brutality. A massive, military-grade car bomb had been secretly planted directly under the driver's seat. The resulting explosion was so catastrophic that it completely obliterated the vehicle, launching the burning wreckage over a stone wall, and deep into a nearby agricultural field. The blast radius was terrifying, blowing out windows in the surrounding village and sending a thick column of black smoke high into the bright blue sky. Her son, hearing the deafening boom from their family home, sprinted barefoot down the road only to find an apocalyptic scene of twisted metal and raging fire. There was absolutely nothing he could do. This was not a simple warning, and it was not a crime of passion. It was a highly sophisticated, military-style execution designed to send a chilling message to anyone else who dared to look into the government's financial dealings. The aftermath plunged the nation into paralyzed shock. Investigators swarmed the smoldering crater, quickly realizing the level of expertise required to obtain, plant, and detonate such a devastating device remotely. The assassins wanted to make a public spectacle of her death. But in their arrogance, they left behind a faint digital trail that investigators slowly began to piece together. Do you think a crime this loud and public is a sign of ultimate power, or a sign of absolute desperation? Share your perspective in the comments section below. Make sure to hit that like button if you are hooked on this mystery, because the phone records recovered from the ashes were about to point straight to the most powerful men in the entire country. The investigation into the assassination became one of the most intense manhunts in European history. Europol and international agencies stepped in to assist local authorities. Within weeks, police managed to track down and arrest the triggermen, hardened criminals who had executed the remote detonation. But these men were simply the muscle, paid mercenaries who had no personal vendetta against the journalist. The real prize was the intellectual author, the person who signed the check. As digital forensic experts traced burner phones, offshore bank transfers, and encrypted messages, the data trail began moving ominously up the political ladder. The evidence bypassed the criminal underworld and landed directly on the doorstep of the Prime Minister's office. The staggering investigation revealed that the hit was tied to a powerful businessman named Eugen Fenech, who had incredibly deep connections to the ruling administration. The scandal erupted into massive public protests. The corruption was so deeply entrenched that Prime Minister Joseph Muscat was eventually forced to resign in disgrace, as his own chief of staff, Keith Schembri, alongside other top ministers, was heavily implicated in the sprawling web of dark money connected to the journalist's final investigative reports. The government was literally collapsing under the weight of her ghostly revelations. When a government investigates itself for murder, do you believe the public will ever truly see all the evidence? Tell me what you think in the comments. Please drop a like if you want to see these corrupt politicians face justice. Because despite the high-profile arrests, the ultimate puppet masters were already working to shield themselves from the final blow. Today, the hitmen sit behind bars, serving sentences for planting the deadly device. Eugen Fenech, the prominent businessman acting as the alleged middleman, sits in a holding cell facing a massive trial. But the actual political masterminds behind the hit, the government officials who ultimately gave the green light to eliminate Daphne Caruana Galizia, remain legally unpunished. Investigations into the deepest layers of the government's inner circle remain technically unresolved, trapped in a maze of legal delays, political maneuvering, and quiet cover-ups. The people of Malta still gather at the site of the explosion, laying flowers and demanding true accountability for a system that allowed a journalist to be hunted like an animal. Daphne's legacy lives on through a consortium of international reporters who picked up her unfinished work, proving that you can kill the messenger, but you can never completely kill the message. Yet, the chilling reality is that the politicians who benefited most from her brutal silencing are still free, protected by the very laws they manipulated. They survived the scandal, leaving a permanent stain on the history of the island. The justice system caught the weapon, but it deliberately ignored the hand that wielded it. But while this island nation struggles with a frozen investigation, a much colder, more dangerous political landscape was setting the stage for our next execution, where a man walking right in the shadow of a global superpower's fortress would find out that surveillance cameras always seem to break at the perfect time. Number 4. Boris Nemtsov. The broken surveillance cameras belonged to the Kremlin, and the man walking into the fatal blind spot was Boris Nemtsov. In the freezing winter of 2015, Moscow was heavily monitored, practically suffocating under one of the most sophisticated security networks on the planet. Nemtsov was not just a politician, he was the loudest, most dangerous rival to the Russian president. As a former deputy prime minister, he knew how the machine worked from the inside, and he was actively trying to tear it down. He was days away from publishing a massive, damning report exposing highly classified Russian military operations. He understood the immense risks. He knew that challenging absolute power in a country where opposition leaders routinely vanish was essentially signing his own death warrant. Yet, on the evening of February 27th, he decided to take a late-night stroll with his partner across the massive Bolshomoskvoretsky Bridge. The illuminated, fortress-like walls of the Kremlin loomed beside them, casting long shadows over the frozen river. It was a seemingly peaceful moment in the heart of a highly militarized zone. But the watchful eyes of the state had suddenly, and very conveniently, gone completely blind. If you knew you were holding documents that could topple a regime, would you ever dare to walk out in the open? Let me know what you would do in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if this political tension has you hooked. Because the quiet winter air was about to be shattered by an assassin who knew exactly where the cameras could not see. The bridge was a highly exposed thoroughfare, normally under constant surveillance from state cameras. It is arguably one of the most secure locations in Eastern Europe. As Nemtsov and his partner walked along the pavement, a snowplow slowly moved past them, momentarily blocking the view from the street. In that precise fraction of a second, an assassin emerged from the shadows of a nearby stairway. The killer stepped up directly behind the politician and raised a silenced Makarov pistol. Without a single word, the assassin fired rapidly, placing 4 fatal bullets directly into Nemtsov's back. The former deputy prime minister collapsed onto the freezing concrete, dying instantly just steps away from the ultimate seat of Russian power. The assassin immediately jumped into a waiting getaway vehicle and vanished into the labyrinth of the Moscow night. When police arrived on the bloody scene, the investigation hit an immediate brick wall. Authorities claimed that the CCTV cameras monitoring that specific stretch of the bridge had been turned off for routine maintenance during the exact moment of the murder. It was an excuse so perfectly timed that it sent a massive chill down the spine of every opposition leader in the country. The evidence was actively being erased. Do you think it is ever just a coincidence when security cameras fail during a high-profile assassination? Share your opinion with me in the comments down below. Remember to hit that like button if you believe someone on the inside was pulling the strings. Because the men who eventually took the fall were nothing more than highly paid mercenaries. Facing immense international outrage and a furious public demanding answers, the government was forced to produce suspects. Within weeks, authorities announced a major breakthrough, arresting 5 men from the heavily guarded region of Chechnya. The trial was swift, heavily controlled, and completely isolated from the deeper political questions. The prosecution painted a picture of a localized hit, totally ignoring Nemtsov's damning military report that was about to be released. These 5 men were convicted of executing the crime, but to the international community, they were clearly just the trigger men. They were the muscle at the bottom of a very tall pyramid, completely incapable of orchestrating the complex camera blackouts or predicting the precise security gaps around the Kremlin walls. The court deliberately refused to look any higher up the chain of command. The trial ended without ever addressing the massive elephant in the room, the identity of the person who actually ordered and financed the assassination. The financial trail was abruptly cut short, and the mastermind was shielded from any legal scrutiny. Nemtsov's allies loudly protested, insisting that an operation of this magnitude could never happen without the explicit approval of the absolute highest authorities. If you were a judge in this case, would you accept the trigger men as the final answer, or risk your own life to demand the name of the mastermind? Tell me what you would do in the comments. Please drop a like if this blatant cover-up infuriates you. Because the chilling success of this assassination would leave a permanent scar on the nation's history. To this day, the true architect behind the brutal murder of Boris Nemtsov remains completely unidentified and unprosecuted. The Russian government considers the case closed, locking away the foot soldiers while the general walks free. Nemtsov's explosive report on the military was eventually published posthumously by his grieving friends, but the man who was meant to deliver it was permanently silenced. His death sent a clear, terrifying message to anyone else considering stepping out of line. Absolutely no one is safe, and the state's reach is completely inescapable. Every year, thousands of people march across the Bolshamosvoretsky Bridge, turning the site of his execution into a massive, makeshift memorial of flowers and photographs. And every single night, city workers are sent to quietly sweep the memorial away, desperately trying to erase the memory of the blood spilled on the pavement. The shadow of the Kremlin remains completely untouched by the crime, watching silently over the river as the mastermind continues to operate with total impunity. The ghost of the opposition leader still haunts the icy winds of the capital, a grim reminder of the ultimate cost of political defiance. The system worked exactly as it was designed, swallowing the truth whole. But while this murder was executed with quiet precision under the cover of a freezing winter night, our next tragedy was incredibly loud, heavily armed, and broke down the front doors of a tropical presidential palace in the dead of night. Number 5. President Jovenel Moïse. That heavy artillery shattered the tropical silence of Port-au-Prince, Haiti, violently ending the life of a sitting head of state inside his own supposedly impenetrable fortress. By July of 2021, the island nation was a powder keg of political instability, and President Jovenel Moïse was standing right at the center of the explosive tension. He was clinging to power amid massive protests, facing down incredibly powerful enemies who wanted him removed at absolutely any cost. His private residence was guarded by elite security forces, designed to withstand a massive siege. It was meant to be the safest building in the entire country. But late in the dead of night, exactly at 1 a.m, a heavily armed strike team materialized from the darkness. They did not sneak over the walls. They brazenly breached the main gates, heavily equipped with high-powered assault rifles and tactical gear. And terrifyingly, as they advanced through the heavily fortified compound, the president's elite security detail did absolutely nothing to stop them. Not a single defensive shot was fired by the guards as the assassins marched directly toward the master bedroom, completely unopposed. If you were a world leader and realized your own elite guards had suddenly stepped aside to let your killers walk right in, what would be your final move? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if this betrayal makes your heart race. Because the violence waiting behind those bedroom doors was about to plunge the entire nation into total anarchy. The assassins violently smashed through the bedroom door, trapping the president and the first lady with absolutely no route of escape. The hit squad showed no mercy, instantly unleashing a hail of bullets in a brutal, coordinated execution. President Moïse was shot 12 separate times, sustaining catastrophic injuries that ended his life in mere seconds. The First Lady was critically wounded in the chaotic crossfire, left bleeding on the floor as the mercenaries ruthlessly ransacked the private quarters, searching for classified documents before slipping back into the night. When dawn broke, the entire world awoke to the staggering news that a sitting president had been slaughtered in his own bed. A frantic manhunt immediately locked down the capital. Within days, authorities rounded up dozens of heavily armed Colombian mercenaries hiding in abandoned buildings. The triggermen had been caught, and the government paraded them in front of the international media. But investigators quickly realized these hardened soldiers were operating on strict orders from a much higher authority. They were just guns for hire, paid to pull the trigger by a shadowy architect who wanted the president gone. Do you believe the captured mercenaries knew the true identity of the mastermind, or were they just expendable pawns kept completely in the dark? Tell me your theory in the comments section. Make sure to hit the like button if you want to uncover the real puppet master. Because when police began tracing the digital footprints left by the assassins, the evidence pointed directly to the absolute center of political power. The forensic investigators dug deeply into the recovered communication devices, slowly unraveling a massive conspiracy. They identified a key suspect who had heavily coordinated the logistics for the Colombian strike team. But it was this coordinator's phone records that sent an absolute shockwave through the highest levels of the Haitian government. The data logs revealed that just hours after the brutal assassination, the prime suspect had engaged in multiple, late-night phone calls with none other than Ariel Henry, the man who had instantly assumed power as the acting prime minister following the president's death. The implications were utterly terrifying. The man now leading the nation and overseeing the murder investigation was directly communicating with the very people who orchestrated the hit. Despite this staggering, explosive evidence, the legal system was completely paralyzed by political interference. The acting prime minister fiercely denied any involvement, claiming the phone calls were entirely innocent, and he aggressively blocked judges and prosecutors who attempted to press charges against him. The investigation was deliberately stalled, suffocated by the very regime it was trying to expose. The mastermind had successfully hijacked the entire country. If you found out the lead investigator of a murder was actually talking to the killers, would you completely lose faith in the justice system? Share your honest feelings with me down below. Please drop a like on this video if this high-level corruption leaves you speechless. Because the ultimate outcome of this political takeover would leave the true architects of the coup completely untouched by the law. Over the next few years, the trigger men and various logistical planners faced intense criminal charges in both Haiti and the United States. Federal courts handed down life sentences to the mercenaries who stormed the palace. Yet, Ariel Henry managed to successfully cling to ultimate power, using his authority to deflect all legal scrutiny while the nation rapidly collapsed around him. He was never formally charged with any crime regarding the assassination. It wasn't until early 2024, as unprecedented gang violence completely overran the capital and forced the country into a state of total emergency, that Henry finally resigned and fled. But he walked away a free man, leaving behind a shattered government and a deeply traumatized population. The true intellectual author of the Midnight Coup, the invisible phantom who originally financed the mercenaries and gave the final order to execute President Jovenel Moïse, remains entirely unknown and legally unpunished. The masterminds successfully executed a hostile takeover of a sovereign nation and got away with murder on the global stage. The shattered bedroom doors of the presidential palace still stand as a grim monument to a completely unsolved betrayal. The powerful protected their own, ensuring the ultimate truth remained buried under layers of political chaos. But while this island nation was hijacked by heavily armed mercenaries in the dead of night, our next brutal execution took place on the bustling streets of a vibrant South American metropolis, where an outspoken woman's crusade against deadly police militias led her right into an inescapable trap. Number 6. Marielle Franco. That inescapable trap was sprung on the bustling streets of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, violently claiming the life of a fearless city councilwoman. Her name was Marielle Franco, and she was a rising political star who refused to look away from the darkness consuming her city. In the shadowy underbelly of Rio, organized crime does not always look like street gangs or traditional cartels. Sometimes, it wears a police badge. Franco had dedicated her career to exposing these deadly police militias, rogue death squads deeply tied to incredibly powerful politicians who ruled the favelas through absolute fear. She was compiling devastating evidence of corruption, putting a massive target directly on her own back. On the evening of March 14, 2018, after speaking at an empowerment event, she stepped into the back of a vehicle alongside her driver, Anderson Gómez. The city outside was alive with traffic, projecting an illusion of complete safety. But as her car merged onto the crowded avenues of the central district, a dark vehicle quietly slipped into the lane right behind them. The assassins had been tracking her every single move, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. If you were exposing a deadly crime syndicate disguised as law enforcement, how would you protect yourself when you cannot even trust the police? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please drop a like on this video if her incredible bravery moves you. Because as her car approached a quiet intersection, the predators finally boxed in their prey. The assassins made their move with terrifying, military precision. Another vehicle suddenly swerved, violently boxing in Marielle's car on a central street, cutting off any possible escape route. Before the driver could even react, a heavily armed killer leaned out of the window holding a 9mm submachine gun. Without a word of warning, the assassin unleashed a devastating hail of 9 bullets directly into the back seat. The execution was brutal, immediate, and specifically targeted. Marielle Franco and her driver, Anderson Gómez, were killed instantly, their lives violently extinguished in the middle of a major capital. The assassins sped away into the labyrinth of the city, leaving a shocked nation behind. When the official investigation began, it immediately felt entirely compromised. The probe dragged on for agonizing years, constantly plagued by mysterious delays, vanishing evidence, and intense allegations of a massive police cover-up. The very militias Marielle was investigating were actively infiltrating the crime scene and tampering with witness reports. The authorities seemed completely paralyzed, desperately trying to shield the identities of the powerful men who ordered the hit. It was a masterclass in organized crime controlling the justice system from the inside out. Do you think it is possible to get a fair investigation when the prime suspects are the ones writing the police reports? Share your honest opinion in the comments below. Be sure to hit that like button if this level of corruption makes your blood boil. Because the tangled web of political protection was about to slowly unravel. For 6 incredibly long years, the masterminds believed they had gotten away with the perfect political assassination. They operated with total impunity, confident that their deeply entrenched network of rogue police and corrupt officials would permanently bury the truth. But the public outcry simply refused to die down. The pressure finally reached a breaking point, forcing federal authorities to completely bypass the compromised local police force and launch their own massive sweep. In early 2024, the hammer finally fell. Federal agents conducted highly coordinated dawn raids, arresting 2 incredibly powerful political brothers, Federal Deputy Chiquinho Brazao and State Councilor Domingos Brazao. The indictment shocked the nation, formally accusing the brothers of being the intellectual authors of the assassination. They allegedly used their immense political power to direct the police militias, ordering the brutal hit on Marielle to protect their illegal real estate empires in the favelas. The men who had spent years writing the laws were suddenly dragged out of their mansions in handcuffs, exposed as the ruthless leaders of a sophisticated crime syndicate. The absolute highest levels of government were directly implicated in the slaughter of a fellow politician. If you were a federal agent walking into the mansion of a powerful politician to arrest him for murder, would you be terrified of the retaliation? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Please drop a like on this video if seeing untouchable politicians in handcuffs brings you a sense of justice. Because this massive arrest was only scratching the surface of a much darker reality. Today, the incredibly powerful Brazao brothers sit behind bars awaiting trial, fiercely denying the heavy charges against them. But despite these massive, high-profile arrests, the agonizing truth is that the brutal case of Marielle Franco remains officially open and partially unsolved. The 2 brothers were incredibly powerful cogs in the criminal machine, but they were not the entire machine. The massive, deeply embedded political militia network that successfully covered up the execution for over half a decade has yet to be fully unraveled. There are still countless corrupt officers, wealthy financiers, and shadow politicians who actively helped orchestrate the cover-up, and they are still walking the streets of Rio completely free. The justice system managed to strike a heavy blow, but the root of the deadly corruption remains firmly planted in the soil of the government. Marielle's tragic death exposed the terrifying reality that the line between lawmaker and cartel boss is sometimes entirely invisible. Her memory continues to fuel a massive movement for justice across Brazil, a constant reminder that no amount of political power can silence a brave legacy. The fight to tear down the rest of the shadow government is far from over. But while this courageous woman was violently gunned down in the tight confines of a city street, our next unimaginable tragedy unfolded in front of thousands of screaming supporters, where a legendary leader stood up through the sunroof of her armored vehicle, completely unaware that an assassin wearing a suicide vest was waiting in the massive crowd. Number 7. Former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. That massive crowd had gathered at Liaquat Bagh in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, to witness the triumphant return of a political icon. It was December of 2007, and former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was fighting a fierce campaign to reclaim her nation. The atmosphere was absolutely electric, vibrating with the chants of thousands of devoted supporters who viewed her as a beacon of democratic hope. She had just finished delivering a passionate speech, promising a new dawn for the country. As her heavily armored vehicle began to slowly push through the sea of people, the energy was overwhelmingly positive. But hidden within the cheering faces was a cold, calculated predator devoid of mercy. Despite receiving numerous, highly credible death threats from extreme factions and political rivals, Bhutto wanted to connect with her people. Against the desperate advice of her inner circle, she stood up through the open sunroof of her moving vehicle, raising her hand to wave at the adoring masses. She was completely exposed, framed perfectly against the fading winter sky. It was a moment of incredible bravery, but it was also a fatal miscalculation. If you knew there was an active plot against your life, would you risk everything just to show your people that you were not afraid? Let me know your honest answer in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if her fearless spirit captivates you. Because the deafening cheers of the crowd were about to be instantly drowned out by the terrifying sound of gunfire. An assassin suddenly lunged toward the armored car. He raised a pistol and fired 3 rapid shots directly at the former Prime Minister. The impact sent her falling back into the vehicle. But the nightmare had only just begun. A fraction of a second later, the assassin detonated a suicide vest packed with heavy explosives and ball bearings. The massive blast ripped through the dense crowd like a terrifying shockwave, turning a celebration of democracy into an absolute bloodbath. Over 20 innocent bystanders were instantly killed, and dozens more were horribly mutilated in the chaotic inferno. Bhutto was rushed to a nearby hospital, but the catastrophic trauma was too severe. The iconic leader was pronounced dead, sending immediate, paralyzing shockwaves across the entire globe. But it was the immediate actions of the local authorities that elevated this tragedy from a brutal terrorist attack to a massive state-level conspiracy. Within exactly 2 hours of the deafening explosion, before international forensic experts could even board a plane, the local police force brought in heavy fire hoses. They actively washed away the entire crime scene, deliberately flushing crucial DNA, blood spatter, and explosive residues straight down the city drains. Do you believe washing away a massive crime scene within 2 hours is simple incompetence, or the ultimate proof of a sinister cover-up? Tell me what you think in the comments. Make sure to hit that like button if this blatant destruction of evidence makes you furious. Because the subsequent United Nations investigation was about to expose a terrifying betrayal by the highest levels of power. When the United Nations finally released their investigative report, it confirmed the darkest fears of the Pakistani people. The crime scene cleanup was not an accident. It was a deliberate cover-up designed to permanently bury the truth. The investigation aggressively shifted its focus to the sitting military ruler, President Pervez Musharraf. Bhutto had repeatedly begged the government for adequate security, explicitly naming the officials she believed were actively plotting to murder her. Despite knowing she was the primary target for multiple extremist groups, Musharraf's administration intentionally stripped her of her elite security detail. In the tense courtroom dramas that followed, prosecutors argued that the president deliberately created a lethal security vacuum, serving his greatest political rival on a silver platter to the assassins waiting in the shadows. The state had effectively weaponized negligence to eliminate a massive democratic threat. Musharraf was formally indicted for his alleged role in the assassination, a monumental legal maneuver that shook the foundation of the country. However, facing immense pressure and potential jail time, the former military dictator managed to flee the country to Dubai, escaping the reach of the very justice system he once controlled. If you were the judge overseeing this monumental trial, would you hold the head of state accountable for intentionally removing security, or strictly blame the man who pulled the trigger? Share your courtroom verdict in the comments section below. Please drop a like if the escape of untouchable politicians leaves you craving true justice. Because the ultimate outcome of this horrific assassination would cement it as an eternal, agonizing mystery. The powerful figures who meticulously orchestrated the assassination from the absolute shadows were never truly brought down. Pervez Musharraf remained in self-imposed exile for a decade, living far beyond the grasp of the grieving nation. He died in 2023, taking his darkest secrets to the grave without ever facing a final verdict from a judge. In a deeply controversial ruling, the alleged triggermen and accomplices associated with the extreme factions were eventually acquitted due to an immense lack of perfectly preserved evidence that was literally washed down the drain within hours of the murder. The masterminds who actually funded the suicide bomber, who orchestrated the horrific failure of the elite security protocol, and who commanded the police to destroy the crime scene remain entirely unknown and completely unpunished. The assassination of Benazir Bhutto remains one of the most agonizing, high-profile unsolved mysteries in modern South Asian history. Her death left a permanent, bleeding scar on the heart of a nation that was fiercely fighting for its democratic soul. The massive tragedy perfectly demonstrates how untouchable political titans can successfully manipulate chaos, sacrificing legendary leaders to maintain their iron grip on power, while the true puppet masters simply vanish into the pages of history. But while this iconic prime minister was betrayed by a lack of security during a chaotic, massive political rally, our next chilling execution was a completely calculated, broad-daylight state crime, where a prominent politician was heavily gunned down by a hit squad the moment he stepped out of a university building. Number 8. Álvaro Gómez Hurtado. The moment he stepped out of the university building, a calculated, broad-daylight state crime permanently shattered the political landscape of Colombia. In November of 1995, the bustling streets of Bogotá became the backdrop for a massive, terrifyingly brazen assassination. Álvaro Gómez Hurtado was a towering conservative figure, a three-time presidential candidate, and a fierce, unyielding critic of the corrupt establishment. He had just finished teaching a morning class at the prestigious Sergio Arboleda University. As he walked out into the bright sunlight surrounded by students, he had no idea he was stepping directly into a highly sophisticated ambush. Gómez was waging a massive public crusade against sitting President Ernesto Samper, loudly accusing the administration of being heavily funded by the notorious Cali cartel. He was actively exposing a deeply entrenched narco-state, and the elite political powers were absolutely terrified of his growing influence. As he moved toward his waiting vehicle, heavily armed hitmen suddenly materialized from the crowd with terrifying speed. There was no attempt to hide in the shadows. This was a violent public execution designed to send an unmistakable message to the entire country. If you were a powerful leader and realized a rival was about to publicly expose your cartel connections, how far would you go to protect your throne? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments down below. Please drop a like on this video if this high-stakes political warfare keeps you completely hooked. Because the deafening roar of gunfire was about to echo through the highest, untouchable halls of the government. The hitmen moved with the cold precision of a highly trained military unit. In a matter of seconds, they unleashed a devastating barrage of bullets into the beloved politician and his immediate security detail. Álvaro Gómez Hurtado collapsed on the pavement, fatally wounded in front of horrified onlookers, as the assassins seamlessly melted back into the chaotic city traffic. The brutal elimination of such a prominent national figure sent immediate shockwaves across the globe. When the official investigation launched, it did not point toward a random act of cartel violence. Instead, the evidence aggressively pointed toward a massive, coordinated state crime. The hit appeared to be orchestrated by a terrifying alliance of high-ranking politicians, corrupt military officials, and ruthless cartel bosses who desperately needed him permanently silenced. The government was suddenly investigating itself, creating a paralyzing conflict of interest that practically guaranteed the true masterminds would remain hidden. Witness testimonies vanished, crucial evidence was hopelessly tampered with, and lead investigators faced immense, suffocating pressure to look the other way. Decades later, the infamous FARC guerrilla group shockingly claimed complete responsibility for the murder. Do you think a notorious guerrilla group would suddenly take the blame for an assassination just to provide a convenient cover story for untouchable politicians? Share your investigative theories in the comments section below. Make sure to hit that like button if the depths of this cover-up leave you absolutely speechless. Because the victim's grieving family was about to fiercely reject this sudden confession, exposing an even darker political conspiracy. The sudden confession by the FARC guerrillas seemed entirely too convenient for the deeply compromised political elite. Investigators and the victim's fiercely dedicated family widely dismissed this shocking claim as a massive, fabricated political cover-up. They argued that the guerrillas were simply acting as a convenient scapegoat, paid off or politically maneuvered to permanently close the books on a crime that actually originated inside the presidential palace. The family refused to stop fighting, demanding that the corrupt state be held entirely accountable for executing one of its brightest leaders to protect an illegal flow of cartel money. The agonizing legal battle dragged on for over 2 decades, trapped in a labyrinth of denied appeals and shadowy roadblocks. Finally, in 2017, realizing that the standard statute of limitations was about to permanently erase the case from the legal system, prosecutors made a monumental, unprecedented decision. The assassination of Álvaro Gómez Hurtado was officially declared a crime against humanity. This heavy classification meant the investigation could technically remain open forever, ensuring the true masterminds could never legally outrun their dark past. If you were fighting a corrupt government for over 20 years to prove they murdered your father, would you eventually give up, or keep pushing until the bitter end? Tell me what you would honestly do in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if you admire the relentless pursuit of ultimate justice. Because despite this massive legal victory, the true architects of this daylight slaughter remain entirely out of reach. Today, the monumental legal declaration stands as a powerful symbol of defiance against absolute political corruption, but it has not produced a single conviction for the true intellectual authors of the crime. The incredibly powerful political masterminds and corrupt military generals who meticulously orchestrated the hit have never been brought to justice. They comfortably survived the massive national scandal, hiding behind thick layers of state protection and convenient guerrilla scapegoats while the rest of the nation slowly moved on. The broad daylight execution outside the Sergio Arboleda University remains a chilling, permanent testament to the terrifying power of a narco-state violently protecting its own financial interests. Álvaro Gómez Hurtado dared to challenge an untouchable alliance of desperate politicians and ruthless cartels, and he paid the ultimate price for his unwavering bravery. His tragic, highly public death exposed the grim reality that when the highest levels of government and the criminal underworld share the exact same bank accounts, true justice becomes an absolutely impossible illusion. The powerful architects of this state crime essentially wrote their own pardons, leaving behind a permanently fractured political system and a grieving family still desperately waiting for answers. But while this seasoned politician was violently gunned down on a sun-drenched university street for exposing cartel corruption, our next terrifying tragedy takes us deep into the quiet, isolated suburbs of Eastern Europe, where a young, brilliant investigative journalist and his innocent fiancée were brutally hunted down inside the supposed safety of their own home for daring to expose the massive financial frauds of untouchable oligarchs. Number 9. Jan Kuciak and Martina Kusnerova. Those quiet, isolated suburbs of Eastern Europe became the setting for a nightmare that would bring an entire government to its knees. In February 2018, the small village of Velika Maka in Slovakia was blanketed in freezing snow. Inside a modest house lived 27-year-old Jan Kuciak and his fiancée, Martina Kusnerova. They were young, deeply in love, and excitedly planning their wedding. But Jan was a brilliantly relentless investigative journalist. He possessed a terrifying ability to follow complex financial trails, and his latest work was pulling him into the absolute darkest corners of political corruption. He was meticulously connecting massive tax fraud operations directly to untouchable oligarchs, powerful men who shared incredibly deep ties with the ruling party of Prime Minister Robert Fico. Jan was effectively building a digital bomb that threatened to obliterate the highest echelons of Slovakian power. He knew the immense danger, constantly receiving shadowy threats designed to force his silence. Yet, within the supposed safety of his own home, he continued to type away, completely unaware that a ruthless predator had already bypassed their locks. If you discovered a massive fraud linked to the most powerful men in your country, would you publish the story or protect your loved ones? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if this young couple's bravery touches your heart. Because the heavy silence of their quiet home was about to be shattered by an act of merciless brutality. A highly trained hitman slipped through the shadows, quietly infiltrating the couple's home. There was absolutely no warning and no demand for information. This was a calculated, cold-blooded execution designed to silence a massive threat. As Jan stepped out of his study, the assassin raised a weapon and fired twice directly into the young journalist's chest. Martina, hearing the muffled commotion, was instantly confronted by the killer. She was brutally shot once in the head. The couple collapsed on the floor of the home they were building together, their lives violently stolen in a matter of terrifying seconds. The assassin melted back into the freezing winter night, leaving the house in complete, agonizing silence. It took several agonizing days before their lifeless bodies were finally discovered by frantic relatives who could not reach them. When the police finally broke through the doors, the horrific scene sent an immediate, paralyzing shockwave across the entire European continent. This was not a random burglary. The brutal double murder was an unmistakable message from the criminal underworld, a terrifying warning that exposing the financial secrets of the elite carries a lethal price. The government desperately tried to contain the massive fallout. If you were a detective walking into this horrific scene, would you instantly suspect a massive political cover-up? Share your investigative instincts in the comments section below. Make sure to hit that like button if the tragic loss of these young lives makes you furious. Because the grieving citizens were about to rise up and completely tear the political establishment apart. The brutal execution ignited an unprecedented firestorm of public rage. Tens of thousands of furious citizens poured into the freezing streets, sparking the absolute largest political protests Slovakia had witnessed since the historic fall of communism. The nation was fiercely demanding answers, and the intense public pressure forced investigators to dig deep into Jan's unfinished files. His meticulous data trail pointed straight to Marian Kochner, a phenomenally powerful businessman with incredibly deep, shadowy ties to the ruling government. As the massive corruption network was violently dragged into the light, the political foundation of the country completely fractured. The immense scandal severely crippled the administration, ultimately forcing Prime Minister Robert Fico and several high-ranking officials to resign in absolute disgrace. The government was literally collapsing under the immense weight of a murdered journalist's final keystrokes. Authorities quickly moved in and arrested Kochner, formally accusing the powerful oligarch of personally ordering and financing the ruthless hit to protect his crumbling empire. For a brief, shining moment, it felt as though the untouchable elite were finally facing true accountability for their terrifying crimes. Do you believe a government can ever truly cleanse itself of corruption when the criminals are the ones writing the laws? Tell me your honest opinion in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if seeing massive crowds fight for justice gives you hope. Because the long, agonizing courtroom battle was about to end in a shocking twist that left the entire world completely speechless. The international community watched closely as the massive trial unfolded. The ruthless hitmen who physically pulled the trigger were convicted and securely locked away in prison. However, the ultimate pursuit of justice hit a devastating, insurmountable wall. In 2020, and then shockingly again in 2022, the incredibly powerful businessman Marian Kochner was completely acquitted of masterminding the brutal double murder. The presiding judges cited an agonizing lack of direct, irrefutable evidence tying him specifically to the final assassination order. The controversial decision completely paralyzed the grieving nation. Despite the resignations, the massive protests, and the terrifying web of political corruption exposed by the young journalist, the ultimate intellectual author of the horrific crime remains legally unpunished and entirely unsolved. Jan and Martina became eternal symbols of the ultimate sacrifice required to fight absolute power, their unfinished lives serving as a permanent, bleeding reminder of the immense danger of seeking the truth. The untouchable elite successfully manipulated the complex legal system, permanently shielding the true puppet masters while heavily sacrificing the disposable pawns. A profound, echoing sense of injustice still haunts the quiet village where their beautiful dreams were violently extinguished. But while this tragic European mystery ended with an agonizing courtroom acquittal, our final devastating case takes us deep into the bustling heart of Mexico City, where a powerful ruling party politician was assassinated at point-blank range, triggering a chaotic investigation that would eventually expose a deeply sickening, unthinkable family betrayal. Number 10. Francisco Reyes Masu. That deeply sickening family betrayal tore through the highest levels of Mexican politics, permanently staining a powerful dynasty. In September of 1994, downtown Mexico City was moving at its usual chaotic pace. Francisco Ruiz Massieu was the immensely powerful Secretary General of the ruling political party, a man who navigated the incredibly dangerous waters of national power with ease. Having just concluded a major morning meeting with fellow elites, he stepped out of a luxury hotel and approached his waiting vehicle. The bright morning sun offered a deceptive sense of complete security. But as he reached for the door handle, an assassin suddenly stepped forward from the bustling crowd, moving with terrifying speed. The killer raised a weapon and fired a single, devastating shot point-blank into the politician's neck. Ruiz Massieu collapsed instantly onto the pavement, his life violently extinguished in broad daylight in front of horrified witnesses. The brazen execution sent an immediate shockwave through the entire nation. It was a clear declaration of war against the establishment. But unlike most high-profile assassinations, the triggerman was not allowed to slip away. He was aggressively tackled and apprehended right at the bloody scene. If you captured the assassin of a top political leader, would you expect the truth to come out, or fear a massive cover-up? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Please drop a like on this video if this daylight ambush has you completely hooked. Because the immediate interrogation of this captured hitman was about to crack open a terrifying conspiracy that reached the absolute pinnacle of presidential power. The captured assassin immediately realized he had been abandoned by his handlers, and he rapidly began to talk. The investigation plunged into a chaotic rabbit hole that bypassed the usual cartel suspects and pointed directly to the highest echelons of the ruling government. The evidence trail led straight to Raúl Salinas de Gortari, the incredibly powerful brother of the sitting president of Mexico. The implications were staggeringly catastrophic. The president's family was suddenly implicated in the brutal street execution of an ally. To manage the explosive optics of the scandal, the government made a highly unusual decision. They appointed a special prosecutor to lead the massive investigation. In a bizarre twist of fate, the man chosen to hunt down the masterminds was the murdered victim's very own brother. The public believed that a grieving sibling would tear the country apart to find true justice. It seemed like the perfect narrative for a righteous crusade against ultimate corruption. But as the intense investigation pushed forward into the shadows of the presidential palace, the special prosecutor's behavior began to shift in incredibly disturbing ways. Do you believe a grieving family member can conduct an unbiased murder investigation, or will political pressure destroy the entire case? Share your investigative opinions in the comments section below. Make sure to hit that like button if this bizarre political drama leaves you utterly speechless. Because the man tasked with hunting down the killers was about to commit an act of unimaginable treason against his own blood. The victim's brother, the man legally sworn to deliver justice, was suddenly accused of doing the exact opposite. Investigators discovered terrifying evidence that the special prosecutor was actively destroying critical case files, hiding massive financial payoffs, and deliberately covering up Raúl Salinas' involvement in the brutal assassination. He was protecting the very men who violently executed his brother on that street. When his unthinkable betrayal was exposed to the furious public, the disgraced prosecutor abruptly resigned and fled the country, desperately trying to escape a massive international manhunt. He was eventually detained, leaving the entire nation completely paralyzed by the magnitude of the corruption. It was a staggering failure of the justice system, proving that incredible wealth could buy literally anyone, even the loyalty of a grieving family. Despite the cover-up attempts, the sheer weight of mounting evidence eventually caught up with the president's brother. In 1999, after years of explosive courtroom battles, Raúl Salinas was formally convicted of masterminding the ruthless murder. It felt like a monumental, historic victory against absolute impunity. The untouchable elite had finally been brought to their knees. If you found out your sibling took a massive bribe to cover up your murder, how would you exact revenge from the grave? Tell me your darkest thoughts in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if this sickening betrayal makes your blood run cold. Because this massive legal victory was nothing more than a temporary illusion constructed by a broken system. The illusion of ultimate justice slowly shattered behind the closed doors of the appellate courts. In 2005, a powerful judge abruptly overturned the historic conviction, completely acquitting Raul Salinas of all charges related to the brutal assassination. He was permitted to walk out of prison as a completely free man, entirely cleared of orchestrating the point-blank execution that had nearly torn the country apart. The devastating reversal plunged the agonizing case right back into total darkness. The true, intellectual mastermind who gave the final order to eliminate Francisco Ruiz Masu remains officially unpunished and entirely unsolved in the eyes of the law. The triggerman was sacrificed, the victim's own brother betrayed his blood, and the wealthy architect of the crime successfully utilized the heavily compromised legal system to erase his own guilt. The violent death of the Secretary General serves as a grim, permanent reminder that at the highest peaks of political power, loyalty is nothing more than a heavily priced commodity, and justice is simply a game played by men who write their own rules. The blood spilled on the pavement of Mexico City was ultimately washed away by the immense wealth of an untouchable dynasty. This terrifying cover-up successfully buried the dark truth of a political empire. But while this tragic execution was permanently hidden behind a complex web of family betrayal and presidential pardons, our next chilling mystery plunges us deep into the freezing waters of a remote harbor, where a prominent whistleblower's vehicle would be found completely submerged with incredibly dark secrets, locked inside the trunk.